I'm on Skype just on our regular join call, and then I just went to YouTube, and it went on Electric View.
Never mind. I just got the notification on my phone, and it should be coming up on YouTube here in a second.
All right.
You know, there are no atheists on YouTube.
There's no what?
There are no atheists on YouTube. You know, we have to thank God, you know.
Oh, okay, yes.
I caught that. Larry David-esque type of dry humor. Oh, man.
Well, no. Well, welcome, everyone. We're having some amazing technical difficulties. I couldn't even believe it. So I'm just going to make sure I can actually hear myself, and we're not screwing that up too. Oh, okay.
Yes, we've had a 2-hour delay.
Yes, and
you guys didn't know this, but we've had a 2-hour delay.
Well, I think some of you probably did. Basically,
it is up now, Neil. It's up, buddy.
Oh,
it's
good.
Up.
Finally.
I'm listening to it live too on both. It's up.
All right.
And the numbers are climbing, so it seems that people are getting the notification on YouTube. We're up to 11.
Can't believe that. So yeah, we were. You should have. Well, it's all been recorded for posterity's sake on how ridiculous I sounded freaking out at this thing. But the truth of the matter is, we were doing some. Ramon was driving his car. Rick had managed to screw up the spelling of so many things while nervously, and now he's giving you the Russian doll effect, we call it. It's a picture of a picture of a picture. So get off of that before I lose my. Yeah, I'm losing my mind there. There we go. An eyeball. That makes me feel better.
I'm watching you, Neil.
So before we go really deep into, because we have a lot of questions that newbies have been asking us, and I've been trying to get them on, and it hasn't been. Well, this is a perfect example. Did not work perfectly here. So. What we're going to try to do is we're going to try to make the show simpler, because a lot of times we forget that we are pretty advanced into this, and there's Kronos, Greg J, of course, was mentioned, and of course See the Pattern. See the Pattern is more someone who's trying to answer things for himself. Some of us have been doing this for a decade and a half before we actually, get to where we're at. So we skip over certain things that we probably shouldn't. One of them being, of course, is, well, how do you know the universe is electric? You know, one of them, of course, you can watch the top 10 list on why the universe is electric on Thunderbolts. And this would actually come up. Planetary cratering and scarring. Welcome to the July 21st edition of the Electric View. I'm Neil Thompson. Today we have Sean, Jim, Krista, Chris, Buddy, Rick, and Mike. We're going to be discussing planetary scarring and electrical surface features pertaining to their unique planet-blasting characteristics. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. I think, and I don't want to be wrong here, I think it was Ralph Jurgens, who was the first individual to propose that the Tycho crater on the moon, the one you can see in that beautiful picture of the moon there, probably third from the right at the top, that's the left, number one. So go to the right, third from the right. There we go. Your other left. Good. But notice Tycho crater at the bottom. Now, Tycho crater is an example of electrical scarring that is really hard to ignore. First off, the proposed ejecta that are making the streaks, if you look, notice they don't actually, they're lined up on the rim of one of the craters, if you noticed, not the middle of the crater, which, especially if you're looking at the one that is going, say, it's slightly to the left at the 190 degree position there. It's called Tycho crater. You could just type that in. Well, you missed the H, but who gives a shit? Oh, sorry, no swearing. Perfect. It corrected for you. Well, I think that's a bit close up. But, yeah. Any one of them that points to the Tycho crater. Yeah, the zoomed up bottom part of the moon, hopefully. That's a good one. That one there, in the middle, looks pretty high res. So that's good at 1800. That's not bad, too. Yeah, that one looks high. No, not that one. That one you're on. The one you're on is good. See if that comes up to a big screen. Anyway, I can see it from here. It doesn't matter. But the contrast is a little bit better than the other one. But the one that is the actual lines are supposed to be from ejecta, and as you can see, none of them line up to the middle of that crater. They all line up to the rims, particularly the one to the 270-degree area.
Yes, I'm circling the rim of the crater with my finger on the mouse there right now. And you can see these supposed ejecta, as Neil's calling it, start here at the edge of the crater, or edge of the rim of the crater, not inside the crater itself.
Well,
go ahead, Neil.
And there's actually a really good reason for that.
I can see that.
The really good reason for that is because what you're at, those white streamers, we actually see them during lightning strikes, of course. But remember, there's a lot less filamentation. They're running across the surface, but that was actually the leader stroke coming and pulling electrical charge to the area. That's why it's on the rim. And that is why it's not actually part of the crater. It's underneath of it. The crater itself was part of the return stroke. And it actually then created and burrowed out the middle, maybe 2 streamers, wrapped in a circle, buried it out, and threw ejecta around and covered up those streamers, which is why it looks like it does.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a crater right there, or that's been carved out by an electrical streamer, right?
I correct you. You are wrong.
No.
No, actually, they are actually just streamers. Apparently, now this is really hard to tell. We'd have to really get really high res versions of this, but it's like the dust has been uncovered. Perhaps maybe it would have pulled all the material, the surface material, towards itself like a dike, if you get that meaning. But it might not have been so potent, because a dike happens on Earth. We have a relatively thick and moist atmosphere. We don't have to have that in this situation. The dust on the surface of the moon, with absolutely no real air to stop it. It's a very light atmosphere, very light atmosphere. Would basically be pulling material into into the line, basically, because it would ionize the ground, and this is happening like that fast. So this is just the return stroke, or the leader stroke, sort of reaching up. But like I said, not very many of them do what.
I'm pointing.
Go ahead.
I'm pointing to one here that does reach the inner rim of the crater.
Well, it does look like a series of little craters, doesn't it? I'm just asking if I'm from this particular point. You can also see a spiraling of craters around this, probably when the magnetic field ended, just like we see in Jacob Gable's work. All of these secondary craters formed in those instances, which is probably what included a bunch of these other hits, at least the smaller ones. And we've seen that happen before, where it sort of like unfurls its magnetic field, which is a nice way to say that it's using up the power it has stored in its magnetic field. Because once you cut the connection, the magnetic field is still there. If there was nothing powering the Earth's capacitance would die within like 8 minutes, something like that, maybe 15. So clearly, there's something keeping all of that current, keeping both plates charged. And this, of course, is one of the other reasons why we're not covered like the moon in these type of hits, because the moon has nothing to protect it. well, of course, we've seen pictures of the moon itself, usually where those little men are standing, and you're going to find out that it's also covered in rocks. And that's another great question, same as Mars, same as Venus, because we should expect that the whole planet be covered in debris from these events. And although it probably looks nice and white and fluffy, well, you can see look at that terrain that you're looking at there. How would you describe that? 3 volcanoes in a row, maybe, if it was covered in trees? A valley, river channels, perhaps, you could say. But with new eyes, you can see that, well, we just know that there is no volcanism on Earth. Now, this brings up, of course, these luminous things that happen to the moon. I remember there was a story that talked about the moon having, like we see the little flashes today, transient lunar events. What's actually probably going on is they were more powerful in the past, just like St. Elmo's fire, just like thunderstorms, just like everything else. We're losing charge somehow. But the actual level of power that was in some of these events, it talks about basically a prominence coming off the moon. Transient lunar phenomenon is actually what you're looking for. That's the technical term. Flashes of light on the moon? Probably. That'll do too, sure. Why be specific? So it could either be aliens.
I'm a layman, my friend. You know this.
I did.
Me too.
This is actually why we're doing this.
How do you spell transient again?
Words are hard.
Words are hard.
Voice is better.
So we have a lot of people chatting, and we're not even paying attention to them. Hello. Let's go down through the list, and how about Mike? Since you have your microphone not muted, I'm going to give you.
I was going to ask a question first before we start. Can either Michael or Sean take some questions from the YouTube audience, because I can't do that if I'm driving?
Well, what did you think I was about to say?
Yeah, great minds.
Oh, sorry for jumping on the band jumping.
You've ruined it. It's done now.
But I was thinking of it 15 minutes ago.
Moment is over.
It's over. No, it's quite fine. Mike is obviously having a good time talking here, and considering this is what we're basically doing this for, we plan on exploring not just the Earth. We also obviously Symbols of an Alien Sky is a great bunch of footage too. Symbol of an Alien Sky 2. There's a bunch of other planets: the Death Star, Oedipus, Pan. Those are damning. But before we even get to those, we'll take Mike. Go ahead and let's see if you and Richard can handle this. Sean, step in case if things go crazy.
Buried Axeblade has an interesting question and an interesting name. If the moon were hollow, how deep would the craters be comparatively? As in, are they giant craters?
Oh, are you asking me? Well, you're asking the group, but I think Neil wants me to help you answer questions.
I think all of you can for just a second. I'm just going to blow my nose.
Okay.
That's all. Give me a break,
Am I still
guys.
not understanding what I was being asked of you?
Well, my view on objects or planets or moons in space is, yes, they're hollow, but these thunderbolts that did the damage to the cratering on the moon and other moons in our solar system may in fact be hollow, but they don't have a direct Birkeland current connecting them like the Earth does, and therefore don't have a plasmoid inside heating it from the inside out. That's my view. As for the depth of craters, I think that's just a surface thing, and yes, it would affect the rock below it and crack it to a certain depth, but I don't think they penetrate more, very deep into the surface.
So a connection between the depth of the craters and or the hollowness of the moon isn't a well-established connection. It sounds like that's not That's not something we've done a lot of studying about.
Right. I would think it would have more to do with the depth of the crater is to the power, the amount of amperage running through that lightning strike at that time. And as it's spreading out, it's making smaller and smaller craters at lower level amperages. And that's how I think it works. Neil might be able to answer that question a little better than I can.
Well, I'm back.
So Sully's, welcome back, Neil.
No,
Sully's girl, 89, has a question as well. Go ahead.
Huh?
Go ahead,
There's another
Neil.
question as well, but go ahead with what you're saying before.
I wanted to know what it was that I was supposed to be answering. I just literally sat down and put my headphones on. So I figured I could help.
Well, I think we covered the first one. So.
Oh, okay. We'll go to the next one then.
Then Sully's girl 89 says they admitted a bunch of water they admitted to a bunch of water on the moon this week.
Ooh.
So what do we know about water on the moon? What's the latest?
Well, we can understand that the moon has no surface, and we see water being emitted in the tails of comets, and it's mostly deuterium water. There is some reactions on the surface from the solar wind that hit the rock surface of a comet or the moon's dusty surface, which is pulverized rock, by the way, and it makes reactions down at the atomic level and changes, the rock on the atomic part of the rock into deuterium water or H2O water or some other gas or
Actually a hydroxide, and it's actually not water, it's HO.
Yeah, it's deuterium water.
HO.
H2O.
It's not.
HO.
No. No, it's actually HO. It's oxygen comes off the rocks, combines with the hydrogen passing by, and because it's very close to water, they'll mistake it for water. But I think the question was not specifically about comets. It was about water on the moon, and
yeah, exactly.
Well, it's the same process. Is the cosmic rays or the solar wind impact on the surface of the moon, creating water? Yes.
Well, I have actually. There's more questions than that. Where is this actually coming from? Because as far as I know, the moon's pressure is well below the triple point. As far as I know, any water on the moon should be in gaseous form. Now, we should probably look up the see if we can look up the article itself.
So Take Back Space TV says, "Hey y'all, I've been doing space streams from the EU perspective for years.
Oh.
I've recommended all of y'all to my followers. Thanks so much for the great work."
That's crazy.
So see, we're not total losers.
Who was this?
Take Back Space TV.
Well, that's actually pretty cool. I'm sorry I haven't heard of you nor put you on our little list. I'm building a list, actually, more than a list, actually. It's sort of like a database of people who are have talent within the EU. So maybe we should talk sometime, see what we can do.
Well, I just subscribed and hit the notification bell. I request everybody else can do that too.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! So if you don't mind then, before we go a little bit, oh, well, here it is. Yes, like 12,000 subscribers. Nice job. This is a really nice spot. Talking about, well, I wouldn't immediately know it is electric universe related, except for Jove, Cronus. That's, nails it a bit for me, but one of the moons that I've noticed, I mean, we saw the one that sort of looks like the Death Star. That's, I think, Oedipus, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that one. That's minus. Oh, I thought it was Oedipus.
Minus.
Yeah. And then now that's obviously a huge crater in a hexagon form right on the front of it. And to imagine that being made by an impact is almost silly, actually. But I think it's Oedipus, IAPTUS, or maybe there's an extra E in there. There it is. Any of those pictures would do. Now the fourth one in from the left. There, that one. That is pretty damning. So that is we know that that was caused during the formation of that planet.
You mean the 12-mile high ridge that runs along the
equatorial circumference of the planet? Yeah. It does that. It's because what happens in a pinch, you get these sometimes, that it did not completely spin around and shave it all off evenly. It didn't get to complete a full, because that's the weakest point. It has to sort of spiral around a bit in the strike that created it. In this case, that is a birthmark. So we do know that moon was created. I like how they're trying to explain a landslide over there. Like, come on, guys. Stop. You're embarrassing me. So if you want to see a more extreme example of this, type in pan moon. And this one will probably give you an example of blowing your mind. It's the exact opposite of what happens to 67P. Notice how 67P is a barbell shape, and so is Ultima Thule. Pan has a very incomplete equatorial ridge. And you can even see the ripples on it. It goes in a perfect ribbon pattern. There's six of them. And look at that. And it has craters on it too. So that's a birthmark. It was not completed. The magnetic field failed while the moon was being pinched. And that is what's left. That part did not get lifted off the surface. That is impossible in a regular situation from a geologist. It's just, don't even look at it, because the moment you look at it, all your theories are gone. Electrically speaking, you can even see the electrical etching in two directions, crisscrossing it, as predicted, or should be there. So it's that's a perfect example of falsification of just a planet. These are just moons of Saturn, I think.
Apparently, there's a moon called Atlas. It's the same.
Oh, but these aren't very big either. They could have been formed during a strike, like between Jupiter and, not a lot of material would have had to be pulled off the surface of a giant planet to make one of these. You know what I mean? And if we think
it could be the remnants of a moon that was ejected out of Jupiter, and these are the large chunks of rock, like the same happening with electrical scarring on Phobos's moon, or the Martian moon, Phobos.
Phobos and Deimos were expected to have been taken out of that Valles Marineris trench. Yes. Yeah,
exactly.
Yes. But these could be parts of those strikes. Certainly, there's no reason to think that it wouldn't. But it would mean that there was enough material in the sky for it not to actually conglomerate.
Well, the energy was centered on the moon that was just being created, and these were away from the center of the energy, so they didn't get completed, right?
Well, that would be a valid interpretation. We see some of these in slag, but most importantly, though, note is completely different than the 67P idea.
I'm just trying to bring it down to layman's terms, like you wanted.
Oh, feel free. Please correct me if I do go a little bit too fast for anyone. But notice the second one in from the top right now. And that one, yeah, that one. You can see the six sides very nicely.
Hexagonal, yeah. We see that all the time. Saturn, Jupiter, they all have it. It's the Birkeland current.
So, well, someone, what's going on the show there, Mike?
Well, Richard Smith had a question.
Oh yeah, I gotta keep scrolling downwards. Okay.
He said, any comments on the dark ash deposits in the Sea of Vapors, domes and riles of Mars Hills? Thanks.
The domes and rills of Mars Hills. So,
I think we're onto the dark deposits here.
Okay.
Around a volcanic fissure adjacent to where I can't see.
Well, let's take a look. Oh, is this one here?
I think this one might be the one that's being referenced by. Is it Scott?
Richard Smith was the one who asked the questions about the dark ash. The Rills of Mars Hills. That sounds like a song.
It probably will be once we get there.
I found my rills on the Mars Hills.
I've actually been to Mars Hill.
Nice.
It's actually a small town in Maine for some reason. I don't know why it's called Mars Hill. I assume it has to do with the chocolate bar. I don't know.
Well, I got confused when you started saying Versailles, so.
No, I wasn't saying it was Versailles, and I was fine, but his was weird.
They pronounce it locally Versailles.
That just messes me right up.
Or something. They don't pronounce it like the French do.
I'm guessing it's where Mars Opportunity rover landed, it looks like.
If I was a betting man, I'd say it would be a bunch of hematite spheres that were made from the iron of the rock, because that usually turns black. But it would have to be a lot of small little hits. And that crater particularly has a bunch of little cup furrows on the bottom, like a little multitude of craters, as if a beard sort of fell down. But maybe he should actually make, or if you have a link to what you're exactly talking about, we could try to make sure that's totally on there, because you're not going to find what he's looking for unless you know what it's called scientifically. So. Or a date of publication. That might be a good one too. Oh, let's see. Why is gold the best electrical conductor but least magnetic? Buried axe blade. It is not the best conductor. It is fantastic conductor for electronic connections, however, because gold is incredibly malleable, so it will make a solid connection. That's why you use it for plugs. It's not actually the best. In fact, it's way worse than copper at conducting, but still great. But because copper is just amazing.
There seems to be a lot of craters that have this dark dust.
Well, they were going to be sustained, and obviously this is. If I was a betting man, I'd say this is where hematite's coming from. But there's arguments in some that it looks like oil bleeding from the walls. I've heard that argument. That it's actually a petrochemical, which would be interesting, because it does appear to be in patches. But of course, we're only getting a black and white picture. It's not doing it any justice. I mean, if you'll watch Richard Hoagland, he'll paint it green and say, "Look, it's a forest." So, oh, that's a good one. That's this elevation map is perfect for actually seeing the Valles Marineris and seeing how the deepest part of it is in the middle.
I would love some of my folks to be looking at this. I'll put it out there because that's pretty much straightforward right there.
And
real simply put.
And notice how it's shaped like a galaxy spiral. Wallace points this out all the time.
Well, you can't deny it.
Yeah, plasmoid.
Well,
is that a Y circuit or a spiral? I'm trying to see the spiral here.
I'm moving my mouse over the spiral right now.
The ass shape.
Follow that's a spiral galaxy.
Very interestingly, though, if you zoom out a little bit, you get a bigger picture. No, not that far, but go.
Yeah, zooming out. You're right.
Okay, now right there, you got 3 positive strikes: the Olympus Mons and the Tharsis Bulge, right there. which are at the highest points now because a bunch of material had been ripped from that side over to this side.
Isn't this Olympus Mons here that I'm circling here?
That's what I said.
I'm pretty sure that's Olympus Mons. Oh, I thought you said it was one of these three.
But I said the
go ahead.
Tharsis bulge when you touch those. Sorry if I was lagging a bit, but or predicting where you were going to go. However, you can see the striation lines right up on top of that third one, the fifth one up top. If you go a bit further, that one. Look at the lines as they're going north to south over top of it, like streamers running right down. So this was probably again being built up, and there must have been an etch as it continued along its big loop, because you can see where the electricity was going and making that big trench out to one side, and now this is the coming along after this stuff has already been deposited. So this is still a big twist, because if you got to imagine the energy of the plasmoid is basically what Jacob Gable was releasing when they go puff like that. But this was supposedly, if we believe mythology, those crazy people back then, they say that this would be where Hephaestus was struck in the face by Zeus, and it left a big scar.
Not only that, it's referred to as, by people in the Middle East, Mars is referred to as the pimpled one. You see all these little pimples here, eh?
Actually, what I saw that was really good is why they wore leopard skins with over one shoulder only. And we didn't know why that was a common thing, but it makes perfect sense if they saw this. These are the same people that scar their face or scar their chest. And they stand and do the Sundance or whatever with blades. But this would mean that you would see one of those over there would be considered a nipple. You would have a bunch of pockmarks along the southern part of it where the leopard skin goes. And the other one is, your other arm is free. So that what they're imitating then is the clothing of the god. But they would have to have seen that up close and personal after this strike. And if this strike is from 3114 BC or thereabouts, if that is accurate, which would be the argument of the Clash of the Titans occurred then. That's not necessarily true. It's just one of the best arguments that I've heard. Some people put it back to the 10,500 BC era, but I think that it was a much bigger Jim-like catastrophe going on. Jim's not here to take credit for that, but that's where I put that if I was a betting man. However, what we're looking at here, though, means that they would have had to have been close enough to see the surface of Mars much easier than we see the surface of the moon today.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree, because in the polar configuration, it oscillated back and forth a bunch of times, and we could see it a bunch of times, and we watched it get devastated.
But this wouldn't be for this. This would have happened during the actual Silver Age. This would have been after that northern hemisphere has been pockmarked. The bottom one was built up. Whatever was on Mars was killed, and then it just when the configuration broke, we went flying in every direction, every which way, because the cord snapped, so to speak, and we had to go find our own current to latch onto. Now, this then would have been likely when it got too close to Jupiter and got struck. So we see that, but we do not see any. We're not looking at it from the bottom. We actually saw the warrior fighting Venus, sort of like as another planet to us from the northern hemisphere. So that's why I think they wore the leopard skins. It was not my idea, by the way, but it was a good argument.
And even though, Neil, we talk about chronologies and if it happened this and then and there, I've always conjectured in my head that the three pyramids of Giza has something to do with those three strike mounds, I call them.
You know, that wouldn't
craters.
surprise me.
I've always thought about that, but then the dates and, it was the, first dynasty of Egypt that authorized the building of the pyramids all needs a relook, because that would make more sense to see those three strike marks, if you will, and that being duplicated that way. But then again, it gets into
the dating.
Really,
and I'm okay with being completely flexible. I think everyone has to be. I mean, if we get too stuck on, like, I mean, the beauty of any particular argument, I mean, they agree on 90%. They agree on plasma. They agree on the mechanisms. We have that down. For the longest time, however, we only had Velikovsky's word. We didn't have anyone else's. So obviously, no one wanted to join him on the funerary pyre of truth, where they lit him. Robert Schoch decided he wanted to try and figured they were different, but no, they were not. They were the same dweebs that they always were. However, instead of having to go to Canada to have a documentary made called Bonds of the Past, Robert Schoch got to live through the 1990s, where they had the History Channel and Discovery and the birth of the internet, and he managed to still continue to make a living, whereas the powers that be completely destroyed Velikovsky. They couldn't destroy Alphen, for example, when you're on the plasma cosmology side, because he's like, no, I'm just doing electrical engineering, and I'm a plasma physicist. So piss off. I mean, what can you do? His student went on to build nuclear bombs and shit. So he's pretty much exempt from criticism as well. So although they try, but Peratt still got to get his word out, and it was a good word to get out. Without his knowledge of the stickmen and the squattermen and the multiple shapes it took, we wouldn't have any idea about any of these.
We would be lost.
Well,
still.
I wouldn't say completely lost, but we'd have a lot less going for it, because the petroglyphs are like a dating mechanism. You know that the event that created the Squatter Man had to occur at a certain point, if it was carved in stone. And
they assumed 20,000 years ago that it appeared.
So that could be the original. But the shirt I'm wearing right now is a variation of the Squatter Man with the multiple toroids in a stack. That would be the Stairway to Heaven, no doubt. In fact, likely the reason they went from building pyramids to building ziggurats, for that exact reason. Because why they put the big stairway leading up the Temple of the Sun in Tiwanaku, whatever it's called. Yeah, that one. So you would be staying there at Tiwanaku, doing your. Everyone will be in the center courtyard, and no matter which way you looked, they are walking up that stairway to heaven. Now, in other ways,
Jacob's ladder is referred to as in the Bible, and the Egyptians referred to it as a centipede.
Or a
and
spine.
I wouldn't want to be around on the day of the centipede, my friend.
Well, I wasn't. Well, they built monuments, so they had to have survived it. But basically, underneath that Taurus.
Yeah, but I suggest that if there were billions of people on the planet that died, that day, they died. A lot of them, and not many survived.
Don't think so at all. I think this was one of the many forms it took. We were relatively secured inside of and protected.
Well, there was an ancient civilization that got wiped out by all of this. And,
there was a flood.
Well, no, not only a flood. There was, I believe, the thunderbolts of the gods were responsible in breaking up Pangea about 20,000 years ago and just devastating the planet.
Well, you can believe that. And it doesn't sound completely unreasonable. However, the evidence that I seem to be seeing from here indicate, I mean, it's very clear how much the moon is close to us. How much water does it move around? Does anyone have a clue? Well, a lot.
Quite a bit.
We have very high tides here, as we've mentioned before. We have about 45 foot tides. So that's about 15 to 16 meters. And it comes up this
wow.
trench. And so you can basically go out and walk on the ocean floor, and obviously it's very dangerous to go exploring caves. The water can come in pretty quick, that kind of stuff. But anyway, the point is that the moon itself generates tides. Now, and it's supposed to be gravity-based, but let's just say, for lack of a better term, that gravity and electricity are somehow involved in moving this water around. Leave it at that. The combined force of that is moving this water. Now, if we had Uranus, Saturn, Venus, Mars, and maybe Mercury in a conjunction to the north of us, then all of the water would be pulled northwards.
Yeah.
All of it. And we know that around the equator, so we were part of the Saturnian system for a long time, and we built down near the edges of the rivers and along the shorelines. Well, those shorelines were 300 feet lower along the equator. We know that it went up. It would have to go up at the North Pole and the South Pole. But in addition to that, we do have evidence of at least going up in the North Pole. In the North Pole, there is some evidence that they found fire 50 meters above the shoreline where the shore used to be. So the water was pulled up, but it was also being vaporized, because it's getting hit by all of the bottom of that current, which is getting real close to the water. It would have been a massive torrent coming up, pulling up to the North Pole. It would come down as snow, and some people guessed it was over 300 miles high, like right out in his face. So this would have been where all the snow came from during this, the Ice Age type of thing. But it's still etching a lot of material, a lot of water, and we built a lot more down to the shoreline. So then here comes the king of the gods, Zeus, to now dethrone Odin, and that's happening above the North Pole, above our heads, and they get knocked out to the side, and we get flung off with these other planets. Now, some of them are still connected, and they're going to maintain that connection, which is the Venus and Mars, for example. And a few other ones look like Hermes, like Mercury flying back and forth, very zippy. But the two big ones flew off. Now, that is the creation myth in a nutshell, because basically
four big ones.
All of that
flew off,
water,
Neil.
I know. Well, I don't know how many there were. We know that there was probably at least two. I don't know about Neptune.
Well, the descriptions describe Neptune and Uranus battling it out with Zeus and Apollo.
Number one, it's Uranus.
So not Apollo, but...
And I'm sure that I don't have any doubt that there was the clashing of the Titans going on. I mean, he controlled and maintained his dominance. But the issue is that all the heat that was vaporizing and making it very humid and lovely on the north and northern hemisphere, and constant light, and the water being held up, are now all gone. And now we are really rebalancing electrically. So yes, it would be thunder of lightning. Yes, every time a planet came by, it would be devastating. But the water itself would completely slosh, and then all of that water that was being vaporized is no longer being vaporized. It must now rain back down out of the atmosphere. And it did that for a very long time. Probably 40 days and 40 nights. But that's what people live through. Now, no one saw this coming. No one had a clue. Noah didn't have a clue, because if you go and read the Epic of Gilgamesh, you know that it wasn't about Noah. It was about an event seen in the sky. And that was that sailing boat that was sailing off, that boat of the gods. The boat that was on fire that you light when the gods die. That flaming boat, which looks like Vishnu lying on his side holding a flower. It's exactly the same motif repeated different ways. So we know it was an astral event. And we also know that Noah's Ark used to be, according to the ancients, also a pyramid. So the light was no longer there, and as it was flying off, it took the light with it, the glory of God or whatever. And it was trailing behind it, creating this boat-like structure as it flew away. I'm not sure why it was boat-like, but you can look at the petroglyphs. This is different than, it would be Osiris, the dying god. Now, here I said that we weren't going to get into this, and look, I violated my own rules. So back to etching planets. Let's read another one then. Let's see what people are saying. I'll let Mike pick one. Or
Sure,
Sean.
Yeah, go ahead. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm here. You said read another one and another question?
Yeah. Since I'm still stuffed up, I don't want to keep on letting people listen to my voice.
You brought the good one up about the gold. I looked at that one, and we were kind of right on the same page. I'm looking back up Cleopatra's Needle.
The reason why I'm hovering on this image is because I didn't realize that Squatterman split in two. And now that I've realized that, all the twin mythology around the world makes perfect sense now. Romulus and Remus, we're looking at it right now.
Wow.
Squatterman.
Yes, there was
the double eagle for all of these symbols of these elites of the world. They don't even know what it means, but now I understand what it means. Oh my God.
Actually, just so I don't blow your mind too much, two pillars and a doorway with a peak on top is this beginning to every house. And it's the same symbol.
The pillars of Hercules.
That's the story of Samson, too. Samson grabbed the pillars.
Which is why the pillars of Hercules are not the Strait of Gibraltar.
Yeah.
When
and Atlantis is in the North Pole.
Exactly. That's why it's beyond the pillars of Hercules. It is basically saying, if you want to get, basically what the Egyptians were telling Solon, or which was translated to whatever his name was, that we get the version of it, that story, that he was basically saying, and they didn't even know this, but they were saying, it lies on another fucking world. You have to travel the Rainbow Bridge to go see Atlantis now. And you can see, if you go to even the 4 images over on the screen you're on, it says related images, and you can see one more, that one. And you can see that is the same, the Rosicrucian cross, the same as the thing, but it rotated. And those 4 rivers or pathways are the rivers of Atlantis, and they were made out of auriclicum, which was an orangish gold.
And they are the 4 winds as well, not only the 4 rivers.
So this
is the thing with our history, people. We, as a people, took portions of this and made symbols of it. We took the whole entire thing and made symbols of it. We took little portions of the stories of these planets interacting with each other and made stories of it. This is why it's so confusing.
Sean, for a second there, did you just have a Martin Luther King flashback?
No, not necessarily.
Okay, because I totally did when he said, we as a people, and all it was, we'll get to the promised land.
Yeah, well,
that's all I heard to hear. I was expecting
I'd like to submit that
But the stories, I mean, you see that from the archetype symbols, like the double squatter man and just the repeat of symbols.
Sometimes they were holding 2 staves when they were further apart. Because we could see the outer ring, and the main current was just one squatter man with a shimmering ring around it. Not unlike when you see multiple shells of a tornado, a water spout. Remember how we were looking at a water spout? You saw an inner one, then another one, then another one, and then another one. There was 4 of them. I thought that was great. Oh, what is this that you're into?
Comment.
No, go ahead.
Let me make the comment. People in the audience, I'm looking at questions, and you guys are kind of questioning and talking back and forth in the chat room. Ask a specific question, because I saw one about Archimedes, maybe.
Portal of Creation, it's called, Neil. This is based on plasma and the electric universe. Have you've never seen this before?
Apparently not.
Yeah, the double squatter man. I've seen some.
Oh, fractals. He's into fractals too.
So I'm reading a comment from Silent Murmur. I don't know if it's so much of a question. So that solar hexagonal lattice and trains all their planets since they move through the same larger plasma magnetic field. Yeah, I'm trying to get a question out of the chat room. They're kind of talking amongst themselves, it seems like, which is fine.
I'll ask them if they have a question for us.
Yeah, you guys have specific questions. Bring specific questions. I could even bring up questions from the group I was in last week.
Go ahead, throw one out there.
It wasn't so much planetary scarring, but I did bring it up since that's the topic.
The Jed pillars that we were talking about in William Armastosa's video. I like that right there.
And our Jed pillars are our backbone, and our Z pinch is our heart, and we have a second Z pinch in our brain, which is our pineal gland.
Or the snake that wrapped around the tree. Bit the
or the caduceus.
No, I guess a good thing to talk about even is let's say for the general viewing.
We're getting on to symbolism again. We got to go back to planetary scarring. But keep going.
Okay, say we look at the scarring of Mars. We're saying it's scarred,
right?
But then you have NASA astrophysicists that would say there was water there at one time. To explain to people the difference in water patterns and electrical fractal patterns, whereas you can differentiate that. Oh no, there wasn't water on Mars, and it's just gone. And that's where the water was. That's electrical discharge patterns.
It is symbols of an alien sky 2. That is the video to go to. I would not do it any more justice than they would.
Right.
When he goes into,
and Buddy's there too somewhere. Where's Buddy at? Buddy's there.
Buddy will talk.
Because Buddy, Buddy has done fractal branding, and it's the way the electrical discharge.
Well, there's some of an example right there.
It's different than that of water channels, because people would say conjecture, oh yeah, that stuff on the planets and then space. See, there was water on those planets, and the water is just gone now. We don't know what happened to it, but it was water. That's a good general question. The difference between electrical scarring and water.
There's a perfect example of it right there. Notice how, if you go to the Grand Canyon, this is another thing that we noticed, and Buddy will tell you.
Hang on. There's a question here. So this is a really deep and simple exploration of rheology and rheometry, which is flow and flow geometry. Flow geometry is rheometry, and the study of flows is rheology. So when you start to study these, you realize that these are all based off of pressure and the release of pressure, which you have. There's what is it? Compression and rarefaction. So you have these two things. And sorry, you guys, I'm tending to cooking buttered noodles as well, chicken stuff. So anyway, so what it is you'll see these patterns everywhere, and we want to assume naturally that they're electric in nature every time we see them. And by studying them they've been central to my heart my whole life. I've just always loved our dendritic arborization. And the fact that the brain does the same thing, and that's where that term comes from, and the neurons in the brain. So when you dial in or you dial out, you'll see these patterns everywhere. These are fractals, these are networks, and these are systems. All things flow in these type of systems. They're another word for it is diffusion limited aggregation, DLA. And whenever there's a pressure and a release of pressure, this type of pattern occurs. And it occurs with electricity on different substrates. You put it on antlers, you put it on bones, you put electricity through bones or on the surface of antlers or on the surface of wood. It'll do the same thing if it's a porous type of substrate. And you can do it on rock. You can do it on rock too. But when it gets really, sorry, I got to continue. But when it gets really interesting is when you start to do them in 3D networks. When you get trees, you get all of the fauna, everything that grows. Then you look at phyllotaxy and how it's the reverse of a Birkeland current, and it's sucking in the light and turning into a plasmoid itself, connected to the circuit. I think that all living things that are plasmoids, and they're complete in and of themselves, and they're connected umbilically into all of nature that is refracted into all of mimicry, all of its mirroring and mimicry on all scales. Now you go back to that pattern and you realize when you see it in a three-dimensional, that Lichtenberg figure, if you will, or Lichtenflow, when you see it in the three-dimensional, there's something about it that's attractive. It's very captivating. And then you start to see, when you take out the golden mean caliper, that the branching and bifurcation on the majority of all of these trees are the golden mean. And there's
not only that, there's the scalloping around the edges of the craters themselves that follow that rule as well.
Remember when I told you that I remember the first thing I talked to you about, buddy, when I met you. You asked me a question, and I said, do you think it's related, or you mentioned the golden mean. I said, do you think it's related to plasma's inherent relationship between transverse waves or light and inductance, how they happen to be the golden mean away from each other? Because inductance happens at a pi over 2 or something like that, and of course the speed of light is the speed of light. So because light is spiraling in a torus as it goes through, we know that is the spiraling of the light is how we can see how it twists and stuff. It's not just going back and forth perfectly. So right. It was just toroidal. Yes, there's a toroid basically in the movement. If you imagine it, remember when you see
that's what that toroid in the movement is the Hopf vibration.
Really?
And that perpetual, yes.
I did not know it was called something.
Yes, it's mathematical.
No, it's cool. It's cool. It's the reason I don't. You learn something new every day, but this is why I might love electrical engineering, but at the same time,
I'm sure you would love it already, right? Aren't you an electrical engineer?
No, but I mean,
Neil,
I could speak on that term a lot easier than I could just jump into,
Can I continue though?
Let
me continue.
Just let me, buddy, just 1 second. Yeah. I have stopped here. Herbie's Chasma is a fairly large canyon in the Valles Marineris complex that has absolutely no outlet or inlet on the surface. That comes from NASA, and that backs up Neil's statement that Valles Marineris is deeper in the bottom, in the middle, and that's impossible. Go ahead, buddy.
And just the reason I said that, and this is not to you, buddy, this is just basically the reason I mentioned this one to people here. If you really want to know, over the next probably about 5 minutes into maybe 15 or 20 minutes tops, it goes all over the surface of Mars, and that alone, it shows you about the scallops, how they're in the wrong place. They're not basically running the way that you would think that because running water will fan out, but this stuff has the fans at the top and get pinched at the bottom, which is how Townsend discharges work. So Ralph Jurgens, there's maybe I was wrong and it wasn't Ralph who mentioned Tycho, but still, I agree it was created within minutes. But anyway, go ahead there, buddy. Oh, sorry, Sean. Either of you, really? Fight for it?
So let me just wrap up real quick my thoughts on these these neural networks, because ultimately they're all connected in some sort of a way. So you put paint on one canvas, and then you squish it down with another piece of cardboard on top, and you peel it off. You have mountain ridges. You have perfect mountain ridges, and not only are they mountain ridges, but they give you the most beautiful dendritic type of patterns. I've been painting like this since a middle schooler, and this is what's been like my curiosity moving forward with these. And now that I'm working with them on an electrical level in a deadly manner, I'm driven by the pattern of it. And like I shared some photos earlier, I just did some rifles, and even though I could die making these, it's just there's something that's drawn. There's a beauty that's in them that draws me towards it to understand them more. And
right, and I don't want to show the rifles because they'll do something with the algorithm at YouTube, and it'll affect the video.
So consciousness
That sucks.
flows. My supposition is consciousness flows in these types of dendritic Lichtenberg type of flow patterns. Well,
just look at the falsifications of any water, guys, as Buddy is talking. Please go on, Buddy. Just beautiful.
Yeah, it's all helical entanglement. Ultimately, when you look at a fractal, what does a fractal do best? It replicates. That's what life does. So life is fractal on all scales, in every scale, and these recursions are peduncles of each other, and they keep burping each other out, and just nature just constantly does this. And when the pinch or when a catastrophe happens and all of life is wiped out and it comes back, the circuit's realigned, all of a sudden there's this proliferation of life and an explosion of life every single time. And it's like the memory is already inherent inside of these Lichtenberg-like styles, and they flow, I suppose, along with the local chimney. As the chimney is moving, these are inductance that life induces life. So if that's real, that's very electric and that's very fractal.
Actually, buddy, I just heard a little story about that today, that in the genesis of a cell, when the sperm meets the egg, the information comes from outside the cell to start the growing.
When the flash happens?
No, not from inside the cell. The information is outside the cell. We're talking down on the quantum level energies that are photons that are coming in and giving the instructions to start everything and to organize everything. It's proven in I can't remember where I read that, but it's proven that it happens.
Number one, it can't be, because nothing can be proven. And
you're aware that, regardless of that, when a sperm does enter the egg, a flash of light happens, and the more zinc inside of the coupling, the brighter the flash, and the more healthy the baby. So right there is your eugenics. Done.
Well,
all
DNA
right.
DNA now, replicates itself by light signals.
If you were to do this in a what are they, test tube babies or whatever, you get the brightest flash, you'll have a really healthy child. So you use how many millions or billions of sperm, and but the problem is every time they come together, it's going to start, whether it's dim or bright. But that's literally laboratory eugenics, if you want to get down to it.
I don't think you're using the word eugenics right, but
well, you know what I mean. Ultimately,
I think you mean epigenetics.
making the
Every
greatest hybrid civilization based off of the brighter flash of the egg and embryo matching. And maybe a computer does it, an algorithm in a computer watches it all day.
I suppose you could be looking for the best flashes to give you the best sperm, to make the best babies.
Yeah.
I suppose. But if we already had that ability.
Sounds scary.
Done.
You know what sounds scary? Look at this picture.
Nature takes care of that already, because the strongest or more flashiest sperm gets to the egg first.
Hey, you guys are how do I keep you guys on track? I'm going to have to start beating you with sticks.
My sperm are flashier than your sperm.
I can just mute them, can't I?
Hey, have you seen this color?
We're talking about... Okay. You're allowed to talk about this. You're allowed to talk about anything as long as you put the word space in front of it. So if we talk about space sperm going into space babies, I'm totally cool with that.
Neil. No electric.
I have made a
No
rule.
plasma.
We're already plasma. That's what I mean. That is so hard for people to understand that if you want to be using the loosest version of plasma that you could probably get, it just means anything that is ionized. And even loosely, our bodies are ionized. Every single cell in our body has a little. Here, I'm getting off track because of you guys. I just stopped myself right there. Oh, you guys are bad. All right, let's answer some more questions about this, because we had
a JPL. There's a JPL engineer, Jet Propulsion Lab engineer, and he helps build and design the spacecraft, and the sensors, I call them, are used. And there's a video that got millions of views, and he was talking about, oh my goodness, Mars. I knew when I looked at Mars there was water there. I knew when I looked at Mars there was water there. I knew when I looked at Mars there was water there. That's stuff that's drilled in our heads from uniformitarianism type principles.
Oh, so you're talking about the guy Lowell Observatory. He was looking up at the canals of Mars, and he was painting them, and he saw these canals. Now, I learned, and I did only when I went there, is one of the problems is that sunlight without shielding is bad for you. And even the reflected sunlight off of Mars going back into this guy's poor eye really did some damage in there. Lowell Observatory is probably where you want to go with that. And then it will show you one of the telescopes is named after this particular guy. Lowell was the funder. He was basically the guy that made Flagstaff, Arizona. The brass one is the one that you were talking about. That one there, whatever that one's called. That telescope is his name. The guy who was looking at Mars. Clark. It says there's a Clark telescope.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the one. And by the way, in case you're interested and happen to be in the Flagstaff area, you can rent time on it or use it for free if they don't give you crap. If you happen to be interested. And as you can see,
look at that
it
counterbalance.
is one heck of a telescope.
See that counterbalance on the other side of it? Wow.
Oh, yeah. If you notice on the corners up at the top, there are tires. See, he used to have it on a liquid system to turn the whole thing. But after a while, he got the engineers to because they could hear it all night turning. Whenever he pointed it somewhere else, it would go, and of course it would echo through the valley because he's on the top of the mountain, right? So he put these tires up and made it a lot more soundproof for the people around when it became an issue. So just an interesting fact, I guess.
Factoid alert.
Hey, I just happened to go there and I loved it. I mean, there was a lot. There were a lot to do, and you get to see some of the ways that they how do they just basically build, like when you think of electronics and then getting a sensor to sense something, but when you go to some of the devices that they used in their museum, it was like literally just like pieces of glass correctly calibrated the right way to get the spectrometer. Like that's all a spectrometer was, you know what I mean? Like, so that's what they were doing and what they were figuring out. And they bucked the system, and they still to this day buck the system. So if you're a little bit more of a rebel, that might be a good place. I myself talked to one of the guys there, and he promised that he would write me, but I'm pretty sure he probably looked up the electric universe later and said, nah.
Wow, that's one hell of a burial site.
Hey, well, yeah, I guess.
That's his mausoleum.
Yeah, he's not looking too good in there. I'm just kidding. I never went inside.
There's a person in the chat room, Silent Murmur, saying it's really hard for people to understand plasma. I don't think it's hard for people to understand plasma. I think the problem with us in the human condition, I refer to it as now, is there's so many paradigms and sub-paradigms nowadays. Because of the advent, obviously, of the internet, it only reinforces our own biases. Reading from a paradigm list from Michael Armstrong, the publisher at Mikamar, who's one of the pioneers of the Thunderbolts project. You have creation, evolution, Big Bang, expanding universe, growing universe, steady state, holographic universe, bicameral brain mind, Copenhagen quantum physics, morphogenic resonance field, electric universe, universe is a living organism, many worlds paradigm, multiple reincarnation, and I would also add UFOs and aliens. UFOs and aliens. That's just a list of different. That's a list of different paradigms. So to tell a person, well, what used to be the fourth state of matter is plasma, but it is the first state of matter, is like going back to kindergarten, if you will, in a certain way of speaking, or from a certain point of view. I used to go in Spencer's store. I don't know if they still have Spencer's in malls. They sold the plasma balls back in the 80s.
Well, I think
we were all amazed. Like, hey, you just put your finger on it and you look at this. This is really cool. You can't explain plasma to people, but are people open to new and different ideas is the point I'm trying to make. Everybody's so closed-minded that I mean, I appreciate the people that are all here at this site and in this group. They're looking at this stuff. It's not that people have a hard time understanding it. It's just people just ignore it and don't want to, even whenever somebody mentions it. So there's a skeptic, and there's a such thing as a pseudo-skeptic, and I love those terms. A skeptic is a person, you're allowed to be skeptical about anything. You hear something for the first time, oh, yeah, no, I don't know about that. But then if you say, well, here's the information, and you throw it in somebody's face, and they don't look at it, and they're still a skeptic, now they're considered a pseudo-skeptic. So, you know, it's not that people don't understand it. It's not hard for them to understand plasma. It's very easy. I mean, I keep it real, fifth grade. I keep saying this, Neil, over and over. I keep it real simple when I talk to other folks. Really simple.
Okay, let's make it simple then. Now, I'm going to have a little bit of fun here because this is a good question, one that does not get answered enough. Now, I gave my little definition of plasma there, where I gave my loosest version of it. There's another way to take his question. The other way to take the question, of course, is what is plasma? But not just, it's hard for people to understand plasma because we don't exactly live in plasma. Besides fire, which will mesmerize us, and the northern lights, what
about
enlightening
in our bodies?
No. I meant,
isn't structured is structured water plasma?
Yes, technically.
Okay,
our atmosphere, Neil.
Things.
No, I didn't want to do this. I'm going to actually do something very simple to help these guys, okay? So I gave my basic idea of what I thought plasma was in the loosest terms. Anything that is partially ionized or can be ionized that can carry a charge. That could also mean metals can be plasma, but also the asteroid belt could be plasma.
How
No,
does
no, no,
something
no, 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 no. I'm going to let you have your answer question. Hold on. Give everyone at least 30 seconds to just come up with what you think is your definition of plasma. And feel free who wants to go first. If you want to, buddy, go ahead. Or if you
While
want...
we do that, can I ask how does a plasma form? Is it like from one substance to another, like a transient type of form? How does it ionize? How does something ionize into a plasma? You know?
I can, well, there's multiple different ways, actually, but I'm not going to answer that question. So right now,
there's multiple different types of plasma. And I would say that there would be multiple different ways
Richard,
it can ionize
you're
into
not
plasma.
helping either. So shush. No, but I will answer that question on how that happens. But I want to hear what your guys think about what your definition of plasma is, generally speaking, because I want to hear why it is so hard to pin down, because we each come from different points of view. So best to lay that on the table.
I'll jump out there and talk about it.
Off now. If I started it off, I would say plasmas are conductive gases rather than volatile gases. And I would explain to the listening people, if I take a cylinder of oxygen and I crank the cylinder open, what happens if I light a lighter and I create a spark? Boom, it's explosive. Nitrogen is also, hydrogen is also. Plasmas, and I'm talking about on the periodic table, the helium, neon, argon, krypton, xenon, and radon are what they would call inert, that they're conductive whenever coupled with electricity. They don't explode. They're not volatile. They're the rarefied or rare gases on the periodic table that interact as a conductor with electricity rather than they're volatile when it comes to current. And I would say that's a very basic way. I would say it from a chemist standpoint, from chemistry. Does that sound about right?
That's a good breakdown. As far as I understand that.
It's closer to convention, yeah. But it's not. It's you're right. There has to be a potential. Otherwise, like as Don Scott says, he goes down here at the voltage curve when you're looking at the VA curve for that we showed at the beginning of Krista's video too. Just the last one there. I put a little picture of the plasma's VA curve and how it's all wonky, like to find out exactly where you're at on the volts versus the amps. But he said down at 0, 0, you're lucky to have a plasma at all, because there's no volts and no amps. There's no current going through it. It's just sort of sitting there. But it will conduct, and that's obviously important. And the fact that it does have a resistance, a slight resistance, makes it not supernatural, I guess. Or super, what's the word? Super
luminal?
No, that
conductive.
Thank you. Superconductive. Why did I have trouble saying that? Buddy, you want to go next?
Yeah, I guess I can raise some questions and just kind of feel out.
Well, no, what you think plasma is? Let's go through it. Right. That's all. I want to answer your other questions. So.
Yeah, I'm going to go through it, and it's going to raise more questions than answers.
Okay, I get you.
Be how any answer goes.
Yeah, right.
Can I go first, Ed?
No. Go ahead, bud. I want to hear it. Lay it on me. Or don't. That's fine too. Did he just disappear? Or did he mute himself accidentally? Or did he? Or
he made a jump to hyperspace. I don't know.
No, he says he says he's paused. I think he actually might have accidentally clicked a button on his phone and doesn't realize it. So he's probably babbling away there, and he doesn't realize until.
Anyways, I get to go next.
I guess I'll let Rick go. Damn.
Thank you. I think that plasma is any particle that can hold a charge within 1 meter of another particle, plain and simple. And these particles can be right beside each other, or at 1 meter distance to be able to relay a charge to another particle.
Well, I don't know why you threw the meter part in.
Well, it's because that's how Birkeland currents travel through space. Apparently, Wallace mentions the fact that in order for these charges to flow through space, there has to be 1 charged particle per meter.
Oh, that just means that space has a very small amount of particles in it, and even 1 particle per meter is enough to be conductive.
Well, that's what I said, isn't it?
Okay, technically yes, and so technically you're right, but I totally
did say in
interpreted it
simplest
wrong.
terms.
I interpreted it wrong. It was my fault.
Well, maybe I went too simple.
No, that's fine.
And I think Buddy
you're
just
good.
Oh, there's Buddy's back.
You're good, Richard. Neil, lay off the pipe. Continue.
Well, no, I thought he meant like literally putting as a formula per meter, like and then I go, why do they have to be a meter apart? Like they can.
No, I said they could be right beside each other in, like, say, atmosphere.
Anyway,
Richard.
He went. It's actually you, Buddy. You actually paused yourself for some reason and disappeared.
My dad called.
No problem.
They're coming over to shower because the power's out.
Oh, yep. I totally understand. Well, we'll be done in less than 20 minutes here. We're going to only have a 2-hour show, so so we'll go ahead then. Throw out your thing because I want to see what this brings up in the audience there. I'm sure Mike's reading furiously.
Well, I have more of an ethereal or spiritual approach to plasma, I guess I could say, and an intuitive type of construct, if you will.
Well, they used to call it magic, I'm sure, back then. So, yeah. How are the gods? All that stuff?
I didn't hear what Richard said, but yeah, back then we used to know about the navel. We used to know about the umbilical, we came from family type of structure. And it takes a village to raise a child type of thing. And if you back out from all of this, you realize that each one of us have an astral and a plasmal bodies, and our plasma body is however far the radiance of your heart is able to pressure, I would say. And with that comes exercise of the heart, and that comes through crying and through intense prayer and through asking and through deep reverence and being thankful and having gratitude. That's what exercises the heart, and that's what builds plasma, and that's what builds your plasmic field, and that's what allows you to steer tornadoes and to steer toroidal flows into different directions, which is what your intentions and your intuition is. Ultimately, they're Lichten flows. They're a rheology. There's a geometry to this. And if you go deep into what you are, then you realize that that's what your soul is ultimately. And that's what 99 point whatever percent of the universe is plasma. And we are just tiny little I'm nothing popping out saying I'm something. And look at this mimicry. Look how good I can take a picture of this in my mind and replicate it and show off to humankind what's possible for humankind. That's all we are. That's what the Olympics is. Who's the greatest at showing someone who's the greatest at possibly doing something, and now we're in Silicon Valley, so all of a sudden the race is towards who's the greatest at showing someone who's the greatest at possible artificial intelligence or something along those lines, building networks still again. So now we're crunching back into the what is called the omega point. And in this curl, all things are the exponential. So as all things are in the exponential right now, all of everything, including the advancements in the medical field, advancements in the IT field, all of these are plasma. This is plasma accelerating this. This is the electromagnetic spectrum in work through plasmoids, individual beings. And that's what I see as plasma.
Actually,
It extends as far as you want to go.
MRIs
Wow.
are actually affecting you when they go through you. You're right, because otherwise they wouldn't do anything, would they? They're not shooting rays through you like an X-ray, but they're actually using the magnetism of the certain tissues under extreme electrical pressure or magnetic pressure, I guess in this case, to align them in certain ways and get a notice what's going on inside your head. I never thought of it that way.
Well, how I understand MRIs work is they put you in a highly intensive magnetic field, and all of the little magnets in your body align to that magnetic field, and that's how they take the images.
So, did I stutter? I just said that, but still, yeah, I guess exactly like that. Obviously, Mike.
Layman's terms.
Why do you think of me when you think of layman's terms?
Oh no, I just
No, I'm reminding Neil that he wants me to kind of layman things up for people.
I
You're the
completely understand.
lame ball.
layman things up.
I don't have.
Hey,
no
I'm bad with
idea.
words. Sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
No, I am definitely not the science guy or the expert here in these things. I'm certainly just a general seeker. My first understanding of plasma was interesting to me. That really triggered my intellect was the presentation of the plasma being the core of the Earth. And that we didn't have this solid metal core, but we had this plasma core, which I thought was a fascinating idea and explains a lot about how currents flow through the Earth. And to me, it made sense. And I'm still sort of trying to wrap my brain around that basic idea. But when I think of plasma, I think of sort of stable energy potential, sort of like a foundational matrix, or almost like the ether. The old concept of the ether, and I don't understand anything as far as technically about how those things work. But I am a kind of a big picture thinker, and so I kind of have a big picture idea of plasma as as its own thing. But I certainly am not in a position to sort of educate anybody about my insights about plasma.
One of the things
it's weird because according to mainstream academia, mainstream science, everything is plasma, right? So how is that possible? And then like it's all mostly space, right? Am I right? 99.9% of the universe is plasma. How come nobody explains it? This is what I always wanted to get to the hardcore of. Let's talk about it.
Actually, it's pretty simple. Neutral areas occurring right along the surface of a planet would be where you should expect to see. Basically, everything at this particular point is about the same voltage, and we have enough moisture in the air to about 3 miles or so to basically protect us completely from. It's basically a very strong dielectric field. Everything can become a plasma. Everything. All you need is enough electrical stress. Anything. I'm talking your chair, you, the cup beside you, their telephone. The entire landmass of North America can become a plasma.
Is that how people spontaneously combust? Maybe
that is exactly how they spontaneously combust.
Oh.
Because you actually have inside of your body, like I said, between each cell in your body, you have a difference of potential between the nucleus and the outer wall of that cell. Now, it doesn't happen a lot, and I don't think that we're ever going to actually hear it happen again because we have electricity now. So anytime this happens, it's going to be considered your phone blew up and burned you to death, or you were near something that sparked you, someone hit you with a taser and you exploded, whatever. There's going to be no real reason. Back in the 1800s, the 1700s, and before, these were big issues. People were living close together. And before, if a person spontaneously combusted and burned down the farmhouse they were in, well, they would just think that the work of the devil, you know, and that's the end of that. But if you were in close proximity in a city, say, well, then there's proper investigations that are done, and they're looking over the body. And so now they have problems because there's no electricity. So what the hell is going on? How it looked as bright as the sun. A blue arc was going through this person.
Well, I'd like to add to that, Neil, if I may.
I'm telling a story, but sure, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Everybody forgets that there is a massive amount of space between your atoms in your body. That's what allows plasma to exist.
Yeah, well, the electron volts between them is of each cell is quite high, and there's more than enough there. If a breakdown got started, for them to all break down in a cascade. However, I have no idea how this would happen. Like, how would you? I mean, could it be like an induced current? I'm not sure. How could your body do this? You're not an electric eel, you know.
Are you guys familiar with Doug Voigt? Douglas B. Voigt?
I am not.
He's pretty amazing. Buddy, you might really find his work interesting. He gets into some pretty esoteric stuff, but he's also coming from a firm science background. He's the Diehold Foundation Incorporated is his website. But he's the source of the information that I came up with regard to plasma and his ideas about the Earth's core being plasma as opposed to anything else. I'm interested that you say that plasma can literally manifest from any substance anywhere, so that, of course, that would fit with the idea that there is some.
Well, no, it doesn't. It doesn't just manifest per se, but I know what you mean. What I mean is that given enough power, given enough current, anything can be. I mean, it would be simple as this, buddy. If I give you fractal branders of the magnitude able to pump out millions of amps and millions of volts. You could electrify a landscape for me, couldn't you? And I'm sure he could. He knows generally how to place it. He knows where he wants it to run.
When they fall, we've seen many evidence of that.
Well, what I mean is that since you do it on wood, basically making it happen across a lawn is no different. You just have to basically overcome the resistance of all of that soil, and the water in it, the dirty water in it, would be what is mostly the conductor. But
I kind of want to say, maybe I see something that it's basically a closed loop system. As soon as a loop becomes closed, it conduces or produces a plasmoid, I want to say, because if you look at the mouth and the anus of any creature, realize that all of creatures know their mouth and their anus, and we can hear some pretty loud typing. I don't know if you mute it for a second. That containment is a vessel, and that is a resonant cavity. So life exists inside of resonant cavities, and it's cyclical. Life has been cyclical since it started. It continues to be cyclical, and it continues to proliferate in these the fractal recursions of babies and self-similarities of itself. But as it creates, it grows something that's called camouflage, and camouflage is an intelligence. Recently, the biologists are starting to talk about camouflage possibly being a form of intelligence. So everything's mimicking something and hiding from something else as well. And if we're in the form of if we're in the image of our creator, then our creator is hiding from us. But also at the same time, which is why we feel in many different religions that there is a curse. We are cursed, and God is not with us. We are looking for God to be with us. It's a perception.
Sorry.
You're right.
It's a perception thing. We can't perceive God because it's so huge.
Well, not anymore.
It's the current. All it is the current.
Yeah.
We have to recognize the current is coming in order to be a current for everyone else.
I know. I understand that because of Tesla's knowledge and discovering scalar waves and the instant communication across vast distances across the universe, not the galaxy, that information can be within a couple of seconds on one side or the other. And it's all connected on these Birkeland currents. The flow of energy everywhere is God, is the creator. Yep, go ahead.
And we can tap in at any time.
Guys, this is supposed to be about electrical cratering, and now we're on to God.
Well, God is, I mean, what is the source? Where does electricity come from? What is electricity? We can't even answer questions, but the deeper you go into them, the more you start to realize that there's a self-reflective capacity inside of this, and you see it. And the more you work with, the more you realize you are it.
And it ties into consciousness that doesn't come from us. It comes from outside of us.
And you can give it to other people when your cup is full. The more your cup overflows, the more you can give to everyone else. And this is what the secret is. I mean, not the book. This is the facts of electricity. This is the facts of paths of least resistance and minimal energy configurations. This is what a plasmoid is. This is what an ant is. An ant is a plasmoid. Everything is plasma. And when plasma comes and works as a terrella over the Earth, as it comes in Birkeland currents from the top, the North and the South Pole, it works as a terrella and it sparks life from the inside out, starting with probably lichen and bacteria and fungus. And, lichen's a hybrid of algae. Those anyway. So, yeah.
So you would liken the lichen to algae.
I would liken it to algae, liken it. I'm liking.
I love English. Now, on what this means, however, is that one of the if we're referring to electrical cratering, which Rick can pull us something relevant here, but usually that is why you get the right angle hits. That's why the circular pattern of craters are circular, because they wrap around each other, and as we've been talking about, these twisting Birkeland currents. So seeing that type of seeing how the plasma makes different things, I mean, you got to understand that once it begins to induce, especially on something such a large scale as like two planets' plasmaspheres getting really close together and charges building up on the surface of both, and that's just not one crater. That's just going to be a whole slew of crap happening across the surface of the planet. It's a completely different ballgame. But you're right that the circuit will induce additional currents, additional loops. Those loops are often what we see on the sun and other places like that. But when they happen on the Earth, this is where Andy's been doing some good work showing how things are basically picked up and dropped down. We can also see that, for example, the parts of the southern hemisphere have been mangled, we'll say, and the northern hemisphere has been dumped on with a bunch of low S. Now, that could be debris from a flood, but it seems older than that. And besides, I mean, like, it falls in similar fashion, but there's a lot of evidence that we have been electrically perturbed, and even now that we see the moon farthest from the sun now, so here we are here, and they saw
The right-hand rule, right?
well, that's how the current, you could detect a current, but obviously in a Berkeley current, there's multiple different shells, as we know, going around in circles. Yeah. In opposite directions. But still, let's not dwell on that either. What is good to see, though, is that they detected movement, or they say volcanic activity on Pluto just recently. And I think this is like we see on Io and like we see on Enceladus, that they're basically, and on comets, they're releasing they're basically releasing H molecule or O molecules from their surfaces, combined with H molecules, making HO as they go by, and that is showing these connections to the ring system of Saturn and so forth. With some of these, the Talvashar volcano on Io, for example, wonderful connection, right? And you can see the 4 main moons of Jupiter are actually showing that they have a footprint on the aurora of Jupiter. So there is clearly they think it's tectonic activity. This is what they think, but it's just not. I mean, tectonic activity should probably be considered electrical activity, considering now what we can what we can assume is what lava really is. And it's basically parts of these current loops that these weather systems are making. Now, if you picture all of the torrent of a weather system trying to get through to the Earth, okay, well, it goes through a loop underneath the Earth as well, and it will go out somewhere else. The ocean, of course, being a big flat surface, so it will want to go to the peaks. This is generally why I think these are electrical in nature. They're basically slower moving electrical events. Obviously, it doesn't matter the temperature or where it's at. It's basically, lava itself would be a plasma. It is completely conductive. And we find layers inside the Earth as predicted by the model. There's supposed to be a layer, they say it's iron, of course, because everything's lined up in one direction, so they think it's magnetically, like that. But in actuality, it's likely the inner ring to our jet stream, if you know what I mean. So there's a jet stream going across the northern part of the planet, and then there has to be an opposite jet stream on the inside of the planet, going in the opposite direction. And they both have to be positive, and they both have to be positive because the Earth is negative. And that's just capacitors 101. I mean, charges will slam together if they have the opportunity, so that they have to push them apart. So there's likely layers inside the planets too of different shells, and these shells are not. There will be transition zones likely between densities or other factors, which leads me to think that the inside of our planet probably has a giant spinning torus in there somewhere doing some nasty stuff.
There's the moons of Pluto.
Wait. Moons of Pluto?
Styx, Nix, Heberos, and Hydra.
Oh my God.
Hail Hydra, by the way.
Hail Hydra. That's pretty cool. Oh, there's one at the top there. It says Pluto's craters. It's like the fourth one in from the right. The other right. They look quite a bit like EDM hits, don't they?
Oh, you were not watching earlier.
I wasn't?
Look at this. That's a rocky surface. That's not ice. That might be ice fields.
Oh no, no way.
That's a rocky surface.
I would say
That is a rocky surface as well.
Well, we've seen Europa. Europa is covered in ice.
Well, why is that brown on the one side, yellow up on the top, and gray in some other areas as well? I think there's a little bit of snow on Pluto, but it's mostly a rocky body.
No, well, it's pulling. Number one, it pulled material. Okay, given its location, it's further out than most other planets. So we're going to have a positive-negative relationship. So electrons are going to leave one and come to the other. Well, I think that we see a few of these planets that seem to be covered with the dust of near hits, and where it basically got painted and welded material to it coming from another body. And the Earth, unfortunately, is covered in people and trees and everything else, but these things have not been moving for millions of years, apparently. But so these are quite. I mean, look, it got painted. One came by the north and painted it yellow, like the red went by one side. A big splotch of something there, that could be ice. The big white spot in the middle, but.
Well, I'm pointing to this little hill here, and at the bottom, around the edge of it, it's brown, and then it's white, and then it's gray, or all the way around it, and yeah, it's. That looks more like a rocky terrain than anything else. It looks more like a comet that's orbiting outside, and it's not coming in, and it's not it's not being etched like a comet would.
Well, yeah, comets don't have any ice on them anyway, so everyone we landed on has just been a rock. Just like when we landed on the asteroid, the Japanese guys landed, pile of rocks.
Look at the streaks on this hill. I mean,
just like a Luru, actually.
Some of it might be ice, yes, but there's earth underneath there. There's ground underneath there.
I would have to agree. I mean, look at it.
You can see the same kind of structures here on the planet Earth: hills and valleys and peaks and canyons.
That mountain range right below, yeah, that's. I mean, is it just me, or does it look like it has a buttressed appearance from one direction?
Yeah, it looks like it's buttressed. Or buttered chicken.
That's actually a pretty big accomplishment. No one on Earth gave a crap, except for us nerds.
We have these same type of wavy action sand dunes in the Midwest, in the
But don't they look like a ton
Northwest.
Of little tiny hits? I mean, some of them are just little tiny craters.
Yeah, they're just little tiny craters. But if you keep going, they become hills and ridges, right?
Well, there's definitely an angle here, and there was definitely a vortex piling up right around that blob in the middle.
There you go. There's a better image of that. Let's see here. See if we can get a better shot. There's a bigger shot of it. That looks like a definite amount of cratering.
I'm almost mesmerized.
I know, right? I never seen these images before until just now. I know. It looks like little cells of bacteria crawling around on a slide. As if we're looking at something
that's been eaten by termites, maybe.
Isn't the electrical force amazing?
Well, that's definitely...
It mimics everything. Because it is everything.